So thanks for attending. In this slide you see a couple of phenomena that most of you are familiar with. So we have a hurricane, we have a forest fire, drought, and the consequences of an earthquake. And I'm going to talk about why we should stop calling such events natural disasters. Before I prepared for that very short presentation, I went online and checked a bit whether you can find that term, and it turned out actually that the term natural disaster is apparently quite common. So the BBC talks about it, for example, New York Times, Munich Re, which is an insurance company, but even when it comes to the education of our kids, we talk about natural disasters. And one recent example is actually that most of you might have heard about, that's Hurricane Harvey. Was the first major hurricane since Hurricane Wilma in 2005 that made landfall. It's reported to be the wettest hurricane actually on record in contiguous United States. So we're talking about almost 52 inches of rainfall in 5 days. That's roughly twice the amount of the rainfall in Uppsala, the annual rainfall. More than 30,000 people displaced, and it's likely right now to become the second most expensive disaster in US history. Massive economic damage, and unfortunately also a lot of confirmed fatalities. So to understand why I want you to stop talking about natural disasters, we have to understand what makes an event a disaster. And what we first need actually is a hazard, a natural hazard, like flooding, hurricane, earthquake, for example. And then something that is exposed to it. So usually that's buildings or us, people. And then we need to think about how vulnerable are these buildings, or are we as people. So imagine a very, let's say, not so much severe flood event. You can swim, so you might be safe. Someone who cannot swim is more vulnerable and might die. So we've seen this, for example, in the tsunami in 2004 in Southeast Asia, that people simply died because they could not swim. So the risk or a disaster is a function of the hazard, exposure, and the vulnerability. So why should we stop calling such events natural disasters then? Well, it's not nature that is undergoing the disaster, but humans. And there are at least two major variables in that risk equation that we can influence. That's the exposure and the vulnerability. One example was we learn to swim. The other example is that we don't build a house in a floodplain. Very simple. And then, last but not least, if we think of hydrometeorological hazards, that's, for example, a hurricane or a flood event, then we are also influencing it right now with climate change. So we burn fossil fuels and we make them more likely. So when we talk about natural disasters, we take out our own responsibility in the way we shape these events and also in the way we cause them. So that was also recognized by Jeff Sanyo. He was a negotiator for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And he said we must stop calling events like these natural disasters. Disasters are never natural. They are the intersection of factors other than physical. They are the accumulation of the constant breach of economic, social, and environmental thresholds. He actually lost, as far as I recall, some of his relatives in the Typhoon Haiyan. So it was a very emotional speech. You can look it up on YouTube. I'm going to skip that one. I have a final question for you now. How many people you think have died in the last 100 years due to earthquakes? Any guesses? Of course, that was kind of a trick question. I say 0, because earthquakes don't kill people, but buildings do. Thanks.